Hello everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we'll be learning today, Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Chaf Amid Beis. We pick up on Daf Chaf Amid Aleph, where we did not yet complete Sif Daled, Siman Kuf Lamed Zayin, Sif Daled. We are continuing to learn the halachos of Krias HaTorah, the halachos of laning. So, we're holding here in Sif Daled. And in the beginning of Sif Daled, and we had a very lengthy, very complex Mishnah Berurah, Ice Cut and Yud Gimel yesterday, we're discussing the halacha of how each aliyah has to be comprised of a minimum of 3 pesukim. So yesterday in Sif Daled, we started with the case in the Mechaber, reading from the beginning of the Mechaber in Sif Daled, Im Kara Echad Shnei Pesukim. If one of the olim, if by one of the aliyahs, they only laned 2 pesukim, they did not lane 3 pesukim, then the Mechaber said, Tzarech lachzor v'likros, that aliyah has to be done over again. And we went through Mishnah Berurah's Cut Yud Gimel, several different scenarios, exactly how you fix the mistake. I'm not going to go back through it again. Now, says the Mechaber weiter, so we're at the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch and Chaf Amid Aleph, says the Mechaber, V'im loy karu bein shloshtan elotisha pesukim. Let's say it's a Monday, a Thursday, a Shabbos afternoon mincha, when you have 3 aliyahs. So we're saying that an aliyah has to be comprised of a minimum of 3 pesukim. Well, okay, so let's say we had 3 aliyahs, and we had 3 pesukim for each one of the olim. In that case, we would have a total of 9 pesukim. Now, 9 pesukim is not enough, because we learned earlier that the Krias HaTorah in its totality must be comprised of a minimum of 10 pesukim. So 9 pesukim is lechatchila not really enough. So even though the minimum number of pesukim for an individual aliyah is 3 pesukim, but on a Monday, a Thursday, a Shabbos afternoon mincha, you can't really lechatchila have 3 pesukim to each aliyah, because that would only yield a total of 9 pesukim, and lechatchila we need to yield a total of 10 pesukim. So you could have 3, 3, and 4. You could have 3, 4, 3. You could have 3, 3, 4. But you can't really have only 3 pesukim for each aliyah. Now, that's lechatchila. Says the Mechaber here, V'im loy karu bein shloshtan elotisha pesukim. Excuse me. If for each one of the 3 aliyahs you only had 3 pesukim, shloisha l'chol echad, 3 pesukim for each, einam tzrichem lachzor v'likros. B'diavad, if that's what happened, you don't have to make up the missing pasuk. Even though lechatchila is supposed to have 10, b'diavad, if you had 9, since each one of the aliyahs had the required minimum of 3, that's okay. And the Mechaber bases this on precedent. If you turn the page to Daf Chaf Amid Beis, the Mechaber says, Raya l'davar, a raya that this is okay is from Purim morning, Parashas Amalek. Parashas Amalek only has 9 pesukim. And that's what we lane Purim morning. Now, in the beginning of the Siman, we explained that the reason why on Purim morning we only have 9 pesukim and not the normal minimum number of 10 is because since we're laning the Parashas Amalek, and in Parashas Amalek it says, Ki yod al kes ka milcham al Hashem ba'amalek midar dar. It says over there that kaviyachol, it's almost as if Amalek's hand is on the Kisei HaKavod, and the Kisei HaKavod is lacking. The Shem Hashem is lacking as long as Amalek is extant. So as a riot to that, we have a laning that's epis mechusser. The laning is really missing 1 pasuk. Really, the minimum amount of pesukim in a total kriyah is 10. And over here, we're only going to have 9. So that's why we do it on Purim. But, says the Mechaber, since Lamaisa we see that on Purim morning we could have a Krias HaTorah that only has 9 pesukim, so b'diavad, so too any other time during the year, a Monday, a Thursday, or a Shabbos afternoon mincha, when really you're supposed to have a total of 10, if you had a total of 9, b'diavad it's okay, as long as each aliyah had a minimum of 3 pesukim. Continues the Mechaber here on the top line of Chaf Amid Beis. Avalim karu pachas mitisha. But if you had a laning that had less than 9 pesukim, tzrichem lachzor v'likros, then you're going to have to go and call up another aliyah. You have to fix the problem. You can't have a kriyah that has less than 9 pesukim. Now, the Mishnah Berurah right away is going to jump up, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, now wait a second, hold it. If the kriyah has less than 9 pesukim in total, then l'chayri you have another problem. And that is, one of the aliyahs must have had less than 3 pesukim. So forget the fact that you don't have a total of 9. One of the aliyahs was less than 3. If one of the aliyahs was less than 3, that aliyah already has to be a do-over. So the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, no, you could have a scenario where each one of the aliyahs had 3 pesukim, and still you don't have a total of 9. How is that possible? 3 times 3 is 9. Very simple, says the Mishnah Berurah. What if in one of the aliyahs they repeated a pasuk from the previous aliyah? We're about to see in Sif Vav coming up shortly, which is also a little bit of a complex Sif. We're going to see that you're allowed to repeat one pasuk from a previous aliyah. And the truth is, we do this on Rosh Chodesh. I was going to save this for later in the shir, but I could bring it up already now. The laning of Rosh Chodesh comes from Parashas Pinchas, where we have all of the Musafim. And in Parashas Pinchas, by Shishi, that's where we have the Karbanos of Rosh Chodesh, the Karbanat Tamid, and the Karbanos of Rosh Chodesh, the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, which is the Krias HaTorah for Rosh Chodesh. Now, in most kehillas, not everywhere, but in most kehillas, how do we break up the laning for Rosh Chodesh morning when Rosh Chodesh falls out during the week? So we start the kriah, Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Lemar, that's one pasuk. Tzaves b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem es karbani lachmi l'ishai reach nichoichi tishmeru l'hakriv li b'mayadoi. 2 pesukim. Pasuk Gimel, v'amarta lehem zeha isha shetakrivu l'Hashem kivase b'nei shana semimim shnayim layoim oila samid. That's 3 pesukim. That is the aliyah of the Kayin on Rosh Chodesh morning. It's Perek Chav Ches, it's Sefer Dvarim, Pasuk Aleph, Pasuk Beis, and Pasuk Gimel. That's the laning for the Kayin on a regular Rosh Chodesh morning during the week. Now, really, you would think that the Levi should continue from Pasuk Daled, as Hakeves Echad Taseh V'Aboker Ve'es Hakeves Hasheni Taseh Bein Ha'arbayim. That's not what we do. The Levi starts again from Pasuk Gimel. So the Levi, the Kayin, for the Kayin we laned Pasuk Aleph, Pasuk Beis, Pasuk Gimel. For the Levi, we repeat Pasuk Gimel, and we lane Pasuk Gimel, Pasuk Dalid, and Pasuk Hey. Then the Yisrael picks up with Pasuk Vav, and lanes Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, and Yud. And then the Revi lanes from Pasuk Yud Aleph until the end. But what we see is that on Rosh Chodesh, the Levi, whose aliyah only has 3 pesukim, 2 of the pesukim are new pesukim, that's Pasuk Daled and Pasuk Hey. 1 pasuk is a repeat from the Kayin, and that's Pasuk Gimel. So we'll more on that topic later in today's shir. But what we need for right now is, says the Mechaber, how do you have a kriyah where in total you laned 9 pesukim, but one of the aliyahs did not have, how do you have a kriyah where you have less than 9 pesukim? You only have 8 pesukim in total, and yet each aliyah had 3 pesukim. That's whereby one of the aliyahs, you repeated 1 pasuk from the previous aliyah. So now in total, how many pesukim did you lane? You only laned 8 pesukim, because 1 pasuk was a repeat. So in total, you only laned 8, but each aliyah was comprised of the minimum of 3 that you have. That's the halacha that the Mechaber is discussing over here, when the Mechaber says at the end of Sif Dal, the top line, Chaf Amid Beis, Avalim Karu Pachas Mitisha, if you laned less than 9 pesukim in total, tzrichim lachzor v'likros, you have to do a do-over because you didn't meet the minimum requisite number of pesukim. But at the bare minimum, you must have 9 pesukim total, and you only had 8, so you're going to have to make another aliyah. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah begins on Chaf Amud Beis with Mishnah Berurah's cutting your Dalet. Parashas Amalek. What is this reference to Parashas Amalek? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. The kula eina elo tisha pesukim. If you look in the back of your siddur and you look at the kriah for Purim morning, it's the story of Amalek coming and waging war against Klal Yisrael, and that entire kriah is only 9 pesukim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the Kevin the Hasam Kairin lechatchila tisha. Since on Purim morning lechatchila we only lay 9 pesukim, and now, like I mentioned earlier, really there's a specific reason why we do it. Avalamaisa lechatchila we have a kriya that's only 9 pesukim. So bishar yamim on other days of the year when we don't have the specific reason of Purim, so we're not going to do it lechatchila. Aber yoytzer al kol panim b'diavad b'tisha. But b'diavad we can be yoytzer with 9 pesukim. V'loy be'inin asara rak l'mitzvah lechatchila. And the idea of the minimum of a total of 10 pesukim is only lechatchila. B'diavad we can get away with 9. U'bebir agra v'chein b'tshuvas panim me'irais chol kamal zeh. The Mishnah Berurah says this is not a davar pashut, what the Mechaber is saying here. The Gra and the Chuvas Panim Me'irais take issue with this Mechaber. The Daitam, their opinion is the Asarahu Li'ikuva. Their opinion is that even B'diavad, you must have 10. And if you didn't have 10, you didn't have a full kriyah, and you're going to have to make another aliyah. Ubepachas mizeh, if you have less than 10, chayzer umevarech v'kairei. You're going to have to call up another aliyah, and you're going to have to lay in another 3 pesukim. V'nireh, and the Chavetz Chaim says, the afle der rishona, even according to the shita of the Mechaber, Toiv sheyikru b'tzibur al kalpanim b'loy bracha oit shloisha pesukim. The Chavetz Chaim says, no, you want to falazach on the Mechaber, and you want to say that b'diavad 9 pesukim is enough, you should at least lay in another 3 pesukim, at least without a bracha. So he's not happy with the 9, really, even according to the Mechaber. Aiskat and Tesvav, Pachas Mitisha, explains the Chavetz Chaim, like I said, how is it that you have each one of the aliyahs have a minimum of 3 pesukim, and yet in the total kriyah you have less than 9? 3 times 3 is 9. The math l'chayr doesn't work. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, Hainu shekaru kolechot shloisha pesukim. Obviously, we're talking about a case where we laid the minimum of 3 pesukim for each aliyah, because if not, we would have to go back just for that. So we don't have to go back for the fact that we have less than 9 pesukim. We have to go back for the fact that one of the aliyahs had less than 3. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. We're talking about a case shekaru kolechot shloisha pesukim. Each one of the aliyahs did have the minimum necessary of 3 pesukim. So then how do you have less than 9? And still in total you only had 8 pesukim. How's that possible? Kigain, for example, says the Chavetz Chaim, Shashlishi kara pasuk echad me'asheni shalafanav. For example, let's say the Yisrael, the third aliyah, repeated one of the pesukim from the Levi. So yes, the Yisrael had the minimum of 3 pesukim, but one of them is a repeat. So in the total kriyah, you only have 8 pesukim. Because if we would be talking about a case where one of the aliyahs, let's say the third, only had 2 pesukim, we already know from the beginning of this sif that that's a problem. We don't need a new halachah to tell me that that's a problem. Some say that in such a case you are yotze b'diavad, since everybody at least laned the requisite 3 pesukim. So some say that in this situation where you had a repeat, b'diavad it is okay, even though you don't have 9 new pesukim, you only have 8 new pesukim. But since each oila had a minimum of 3, so some say that this is okay. The aliyah that was not proper has to be done over again. The tevas tzrichim loshen rabim lav bedafku. What the Chavetz Chaim is pointing out is what does the Mechaber say over here? The Mechaber says if you have less than 9 pesukim in total, tzrichim. Now tzrichim is a loshen rabim. It's plural. Tzrichim, we need laksar v'likrois to repeat the kriyah. Sounds almost like the Mechaber is saying that all 3 aliyahs have to be done over again. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, it's only the aliyah that was flawed, the aliyah that had, in this case, the repeated pasuk. So because of that, he only had 2 new pesukim when he was supposed to have 3 new pesukim. That single aliyah has to be done over again. Okay, let's move on now to Sif Hey, second line in the Shulchan Aruch Chaf Amud Beis. Says the Mechaber. Interesting halacha that the Mechaber speaks about this halacha strictly in the context of Parashas Parah. The reason he speaks about Parashas Parah is because this halacha is coming from a kolboi, and the halacha as recorded by the kolboi addresses a maisa shahaya kachaya. It was a maisa that happened with Parashas Parah, but like the Aruch HaShulchan says, this halacha is not really unique to Parashas Parah. So let's first take a look at Parashas Parah. Parashas Parah, we learn Parashas Parah. Parashas Parah speaks about the Parah Aduma. Now, what was the Parah Aduma? So the Parah Aduma, they had to take this red parah. It had to be completely red, and there was a special procedure that they had to do with it. How they had to shecht it, and they had to sprinkle the dam in a certain way. Then they had to burn the entire parah. The entire parah was burnt, not on the mizbech. It wasn't burnt on the mizbech. It was burnt michutz lamachane. They burnt the parah michutz lamachane. Then they had to collect the ash of the parah and an eitz erez, an ezoi v'shti talas, and then from that they prepared the mei efer parah. They would mix water together with the efer of the parah aduma, and this water was used to sprinkle onto somebody who was tamei meis as part of the procedure required to make him tahor. So if somebody became tamei meis, he had to wait 7 days in order to become tahor, and on day 3 and on day 7, they had to sprinkle on him from water that was mixed with the efer, with the ashes of the parah aduma. Now, the laning that we lane for Parashas Parah, it begins at the very beginning of Parashas Chukas. So it begins at Perek Yud Tes, Pasuk Aleph. The first pasuk of the parasha, Parashas Chukas, is Pasuk Aleph. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe vel Aaron lemar. And we lane all the way from there, all the way, we go past Sheni, and we lane all the way to till the end of Pasuk Chav Beis. Pasuk Chav Beis is the shailah sheyiga boy atamei yitma, v'hanefesh hanagas titma ad ha'orev. That is the end of the kriyah. Okay, now, really, we could almost divide the laning of Parashas Chukas into 2. If you look at the beginning of Parashas Chukas, from Pasuk Aleph until through Pasuk Yud, from Pasuk Aleph through Pasuk Yud, really details the preparation of the efer parah aduma. It talks about taking the parah aduma, shechting the parah aduma, burning the parah aduma, collecting the efer from the parah aduma, mixing it with water. But it does not detail the tahara of the parah aduma. It doesn't tell me what you do with the mei parah aduma. It doesn't talk about using the mei efer parah aduma to be mitaher tamei meis. That's not discussed. So from pasuk Aleph through pasuk Yud is really the preparation of the Efer Parah Haduma and mixing it with the water. Then pasuk Yud Aleph starts Hanageya b'meis l'chol nefesh adam. Somebody who comes into contact with the mace, v'tamei shivas yamim, he becomes tamei for 7 days. Then the next pasuk, hu yischata boy b'yom hashlishi u'b'yom hashvi yitar. Then we start talking about how this person who's tamei mace, you need to sprinkle on him from the water mixed with the Efer Parah Aduma on day 3 and on day 7. And then the pesukim keep on going, and the pesukim discuss the halachos of the tamei mace and the procedure by which the tamei mace becomes tahar using the Efer of the Parah Aduma. So again, pasuk Aleph through Yud is really the preparation of the Efer Parah Aduma. It's pasuk Yud Aleph through the end, pasuk Yud Aleph through pasuk Chav Beis. That's what discusses the tahara process that the Mei Parah Aduma is employed in. And that we're going to see is really the ikar laning of Parashas Parah. What do we really want from the laning of Parashas Parah? We want to discuss the tahara process of the Parah Aduma, not the making of the Parah Aduma, not the preparation of the Parah Aduma. Okay, now, against that backdrop, let's take a look at Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber, Im Kara Parashas Parah, if the Balkaire laned Parashas Parah, Upasak, and he ended off the kriyah, Bivelager Hagar B'Seicham, which is pasuk Yud. Now, very interesting, because pasuk Yud, let me read the whole pasuk Yud. V'chibes ha'osef es efer ha'parah es begadav v'tamei ad ha'orev v'hoisa livnei Yisrael v'lager hagar b'soicham l'chukas olam. That's the way the pasuk ends. Now, the words that the Mechaber quote are the words v'lager hagar b'soicham, which are not the final words of the pasuk. The pasuk continues a couple of more words. V'lager hagar b'soicham l'chukas olam. That's the end of pasuk Yud. So the Mechaber says, what happened over here? The Balkaire laned Parashas Parah, but he cut out early. Instead of going all the way through pasuk Chav Beis, he only went through pasuk Yud, and he ended at the end of pasuk Yud. Im Kara Parashas Parah pasuk v'lager hagar b'soicham. Now, says the Mechaber, and then what did he do? The Galal Sefer Torah, they closed the Sefer Torah. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is going to say that what we must be talking about over here is not that they only closed the Sefer Torah. They closed the Sefer Torah, and the one who had the aliyah for Parashas Parah made the second bracha of his aliyah. So the Balkaire goofed. The Balkaire did not lane the entire Parashas Parah. He cut out at the end of pasuk Yud. And the one who got the aliyah for Parashas Parah finished his aliyah. They closed the Sefer Torah, and he finished his aliyah. What's the halacha, says the Mechaber? Chayzer u'peiseach, you have to open the Sefer Torah again. Umaschil merosh haparsha, and you're going to have to start again from the beginning of Parashas Chukas, ad titma ad ha'orev, and you're going to have to lane the entire Parashas Parah through the end of pasuk Chav Beis that ends with the words titma ad ha'orev u'mevarech lefaneh u'lachareh. And you're going to have a full aliyah for this second kriyah of Parashas Parah, a full aliyah with a bracha before it and a bracha after it. Okay, so first let's just recap the halacha that the Mechaber said, and then we'll look at the Mishnah Berurah and explain it. We're talking about Parashas Parah. What happened? We called up an aliyah for Parashas Parah. The oila said, Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMavorach. He made the bracha of Asher Bacha Banu. The Balkaire started to lane. He started from the right place. He started from the beginning of Parashas Chukas, but he only laned through pasuk Yud. And at the end of pasuk Yud, he ended the kriyah of Parashas Parah. Now, like I told you in the Hakdama, if you end at the end of pasuk Yud, you did not lane any of the pesukim that discuss using the para aduma for tahara purposes, for making somebody tamei meistar. All you learned about was the preparation of the para aduma. And that's not really the kriyah. That's not really what we want. So your kriyah of Parashas Parah is seriously defective. Now, note that this is not a problem with a number of pesukim. You learned enough pesukim. First of all, it's one aliyah. So really all you need is 3 pesukim. Not only did you have 3 pesukim, you had 10 pesukim. You learned from pasuk aleph through pasuk yud. So the problem over here has nothing to do with a number of pesukim. That's not the problem over here. What's the problem over here? The problem is that you missed the boat. You didn't lane the ikar hakriah. You didn't lane the chayvas hayoim portion of Parashas Parah. So says the Mechaber, what do you have to do? Well, if the one who had the aliyah for Parashas Parah already ended his aliyah, the Balkar lane through pasuk yud, you closed the Sefer Torah, and he made the second bracha of the aliyah, so it's over with. You got to do over. Not only do you have to do over, but the second time that you're going to do Parashas Parah, you're not going to start from pasuk yud aleph and go through pasuk chav beis. No, you're going to go all the way back to the beginning of Parashas Kukas. The whole Parashas Parah you're going to do over again. The Mishnah Berurah questions why. Why don't we just start from pasuk yud aleph? The answer seems to be, the words of the Mishnah Berurah are going to be, that you didn't lane the kriyah kitikuna. You didn't do takanas chazal. That wasn't takanas chazal, pasuk aleph through pasuk yud. It was pasuk aleph through pasuk chav beis. The explanation of what the Mishnah Berurah is saying seems to be that really what you did accomplished nothing. Why did it accomplish nothing? Because, like I said, you missed the boat completely. The kriyah that you laned was not the kriyah of the chayvas hayoim. It had some of the pesukim that typically we lane as part of Parashas Parah. It had 10 pesukim that typically are part of Parashas Parah, but they're not the ikar part of Parashas Parah. The ikar part of Parashas Parah you left out completely. So since you left the ikar part of Parashas Parah out completely, it's as if you did nothing. Since it's as if you did nothing, the whole thing's got to be done over again. We're going to make a new aliyah. We're going to start again from the beginning of Parashas Chukas, and this time we're going to do it right. We're going to lane through the end of pasuk chav beis. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Says the Mishnah Berurah is katan yud zayin. The words of the Mechaber were that what happened was the Balkar laned through pasuk yud, and then v'golal Sefer Torah. You rolled the Sefer Torah closed. Says the Mechaber, you got to do a do-over. You have to make a new aliyah and a new laning. Says the Mishnah Berurah, hold it, wait a second. V'harbe achronim hiskibu, many achronim reach the conclusion, they agree, the gala lav dafka, that when the Mechaber says that they rolled the Sefer Torah closed, he doesn't mean that they only rolled the Sefer Torah closed. Elo ha'ikar tali b'imberach bracha achroina. The main point over here is that the one who had the aliyah for Parashas Parah actually made the second bracha of his aliyah. So he closed out the aliyah. It's not rolling the Sefer Torah closed that matters. It's ending the aliyah that matters. V'im loy birech, if they just closed the Sefer Torah, but he didn't make the bracha, afal pisha golal Sefer Torah, even though they rolled the Sefer Torah closed, chayzer v'krias hamoiser, you would just open it up and lay the rest of the kriyah below bracha lefaneh without making a new bracha of asher bachabanu. Ois katan yudches, the Mechaber said that we have to lane merosh haparsha. We have to lane from the very beginning of Chukas. We got to do the whole Parashas Parah over again. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this that it's not enough to just call up a second aliyah and start from pasuk yud aleph. Why do we have to go all the way back to the beginning? Says the Mishnah Berurah, and he brings this down from the Shari Knesses Hagdolah. Since you didn't do Parashas Parah the way it was supposed to be done, and I'm adding over here between the lines, not only you didn't do it the way it was supposed to be done, but you missed the boat completely. Because the main pesukim of Parashas Parah you completely left out, and kan kriyah. So there's no kriyah here. You didn't do anything. Your mamish didn't accomplish anything. So you got to do it all over again. V'afa pikein, still in all hiskimu ha'achrayim, the achrayim do agree the imdileg eza pasuk ein chayzer. Let's change the case a little bit. Let's say what they did was they called up somebody for an aliyah for Parashas Parah, and they started from the beginning of Parashas Chukas, and about Kerelained, Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe v'al lemar, Zayis Krias HaTorah Shetziva Hashem lemar, and he finished that pasuk, and then he skipped pasuk Gimel, and he skipped pasuk Dalid, and he picked up with pasuk Hey. V'saraf es apar le'edav, v'saraf es b'saraf es dav al-pirsha yisraif, and then he did all the way till the end. So he skipped 2 pesukim in between pasuk Aleph and pasuk Yud. He skipped 2 pesukim. So do we see from this halacha over here that the Mechaber is saying that we have to do a do-over? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. The Achronim all agree. Va'aval pikein eskimu Achronim dim dileg eze pasuk ein chayzer. If you skipped epis a pasuk, you don't have to repeat. The harei kriah parashas b'shabbos shalahen. What are you worried about? That you're going to have a pasuk missing from the entirety of Kol HaTorah Kula by the time you get to Simchas Torah and you learn the Zayis HaBracha? No. When you, on Shabbos, Parashas Chukas, you're going to learn the whole Parashas Chukas, so that's not a problem. These individual psukim are not so hypercritical. Achein. But, Kol Zeh Dafka Im Dileg Me HaPsukim She'ena Me'ikar Chaves HaYoim. The point is, what did you skip? In the halacha of the Mechaber, you missed the boat. You laned from pasuk Aleph through pasuk Yud, but you skipped pasuk Yud Aleph through pasuk Chav Beis. Pasuk Yud Aleph through pasuk Chav Beis on the Ikar Chaves HaYoim. If you skip that, you don't have a kriyah. You skipped a couple of pesukim from pasuk Aleph to pasuk Yud, so what? We'll hear those pesukim laned from the Sefer Torah, Parashas Kukas. We don't need them today. They're not such an ikar today. It's not going to take away from the minimum of 3 pesukim for the aliyah. It's not pesukim that are necessary for chayvas hayoim because they discussed the tahara process of the parah aduma. So it's not a problem. Achein kol zeh dafke dileg me pesukim she'ena meikar chayvas hayoim tahainu ad v'lager agar b'soicham from pasuk Aleph through pasuk Yud. Aval dileg meikar chayvas hayoim. But if you leave out pesukim that are mamish the ikar chayvas hayoim, from pasuk Yud Aleph through pasuk Chav Beis, Hiskim El Yerabah the Chayzer, then you would have to repeat. There's the same thing that really we discussed yesterday. When it comes to the 5 main aliyahs on a Yom Tov, a lot of those pesukim are not really meikar chayvas hayoim. On Sukkot, you lay in a lot of pesukim that have to do with Pesach, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Those pesukim are not meikar chayvas hayoim. Which pesukim are ikar chayvas hayoim? The pesukim that talk about Sukkot. How about by the maftir? By the maftir also, we said. We have pesukim that are ikar chayvas hayoim. Those are the pesukim that actually describe and detail the korban musaf. Those are hypercritical. The other pesukim are not so critical. If we skip them, we skip them. As long as we have the requisite number of pesukim for the aliyah, we're okay. So too over here. You skipped a couple of pesukim for Parashas Parah. If they're not pesukim that are ikar chayvas hayoim, it's okay. It's only if you skip the pesukim that are ikar chayvas hayoim that you have a problem. Okay, now let's go to Siv Vav, the final Sif in what has turned out to be a very complex Siman. Says the Mechaber, HaKoirei Zom. Again, Hakdama for Siv Vav. What do we need for Siv Vav? Just very simple halacha that we've discussed already a lot in this Siman. An aliyah has to have 3 pesukim. An aliyah has to have 3 pesukim. If it has less than 3 pesukim, it's not an aliyah. And what we have seen is not only it's not an aliyah, it's as if you never read those pesukim. So if we're talking about a Shabbos laning, those pesukim must be made up again. What do you mean? Why do we have to make them up? I heard the Balkara lane those pesukim. Mitoch haksav. What's the problem? The problem is they weren't laned in the format and in the context of an aliyah. They didn't have a bracha lefaneha and a bracha lachareha. So those pesukim have to be made up. So an aliyah must have 3 pesukim. Okay. Now we already alluded to this. What if the aliyah has 3 pesukim, but they're not 3 new pesukim? they're 3 repeated pesukim, or 2 repeated pesukim, or 1 repeated pasuk. Is that okay? Is it still considered an aliyah that has 3 pesukim, or do you need new pesukim? Says the Mechaber Sivav. HaKoirei b'Torah Rishon. Let's say the Kohen. And again, we're talking the language here, really, of Monday, Thursday, Shabbos, Mincha. HaKoirei b'Torah Rishon. Let's say the Kohen comes up for the first aliyah. Vikara, and he lanes 3 pesukim. He lanes a minimum of 3 pesukim. Vikara Hasheni, then the Levi comes up. Vikara Hasheni Mashakara Rishon. The Levi comes up and repeats the kriah of the Kohen. Or in our world, the Baal Koreh repeats the first aliyah. So you called up a first aliyah, you called up a Kohen, and you did the laning for Kohen, whether it's 3 pesukim, 5 pesukim, 7 pesukim, whatever it is. But you laned the proper aliyah for the Kohen. Now you called up the Levi, and the Baal Koreh is a little bit tired this morning, and he laned the whole first aliyah over again. So let's say the Levi, there was 6 pesukim, but there weren't any new pesukim. It was all repeated pesukim. Says the Mechaber, HaKoirei b'Torah Rishon, Vikara Hasheni Mashakara Rishon. And now the second aliyah repeats the kriah of the first aliyah. So it depends. Im Haisef al Mashakara Rishon Shloisha Pesukim. If the Levi added 3 new pesukim, so yes, he repeated the whole kriah of the Kohen, but he added 3 new pesukim. Okay, that's fine. You have 3 new pesukim, no problem. Oyafilu shnayim b'makom deloy efsher. Or in a place where it was impossible to add 3 new pesukim. What does that mean, it was impossible? What we mean is it was halachically not practicable. There are some times where you can't add on another pasuk. You can't go weiter. We're going to have a couple of examples of that. One example of that is going to be, let's say, Chalamoid Sukkos. Chalamoid Sukkos, for sure by the Revi, by the 4th aliyah, we're stuck in a pickle. Let's remember that the kriyah is supposed to be in Yonei Hayoim, or Mechavis Hayoim. You're not supposed to lay something that's totally irrelevant. So there are times that it's not practicable to add a pasuk. So says the Mechaber like this. Again, if the second aliyah repeated what was laned for the first aliyah, so it depends. If he added on 3 new pesukim, you're fine. Or if he at least added 2 new pesukim in a situation where he couldn't add 3 because it just wasn't practicable because of halacha, so then so then the second aliyah is still a valid aliyah. If he added 3 new pesukim, for sure it's a valid aliyah. I don't care if he repeated everything that the first aliyah did. Lamaisa, he added 3 new pesukim. If he added 2 new pesukim, so he didn't add 3, but he added 2. Why did he only add 2? Because it wasn't practicable to add 3. Then it's okay. It's considered a valid aliyah, and we have it could be counted towards the requisite number of aliyahs. It's a Monday. We need 3 aliyahs. This aliyah will be counted as an aliyah. V'im lav. But if he didn't add at least 2 new pesukim, einoi oila min minyan, then that aliyah does not count towards the necessary count of aliyahs, chutz miparei achag, with the exception of the laning on Chalamoid Sukkos, where we repeat with no additions, mishum delay efsher, because over there we have no choice. There's just nothing to do. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah over here and let us wrap our heads around this. Mishnah Berurah is cutting your test. Harishon. The Mechaber opened up and he said the first aliyah, the Kohen, he did a perfect job. And then the second one came up and the second one repeated. First says the Mishnah Berurah, v'dafka b'di'evet. This whole thing is only b'di'evet. Aval lechatchila en kedai sheyikra lemafreya me'apsukim ha'koidmim. Lechatchila, the second aliyah, the third aliyah, whatever it is, one aliyah has no business repeating what the aliyah before him laid. In other words, don't think that, as long as I add 3 new pesukim, it's mamash lechatchila. So the Kohen what's it called? Singing row your boat in rounds. The first aliyah will lay in the first 3 pesukim. Then the second aliyah will repeat the first 3 pesukim and add another 3 pesukim. Is that lechatchila? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, it's not lechatchila. Even though it's okay because you're adding on 3 new pesukim, it's still not lechatchila. Why are you repeating what the first oila laned? The Lavush said the reason that that's not lechatchila is because brachas were already made on those 3 pesukim. You already made brachas to lay in those 3 pesukim. Now you're making brachas again and you're laying those 3 pesukim again? Like, I'm not sure if what the Levush is saying is like a shmektzach, like a little bit from a brachal of Atola. It's like, you made brachas on these pesukim already. Now you're making brachas on them again? Okay, you're adding another 3 pesukim. But Lamaisa, these pesukim were already laid. So says the Mishnah Berurah, this is only b'diavad. This is not lechatchila. Aber lechatchila ein kedai sheyikol ma'afreya me'apsukim ha'koidmin afilu im yirtza lahisaf aleim kama, even if you're adding new pesukim. However, yesh noyagin b'parshas b'chukaisai. There are those that have the minig in Parashas Parah by the Teichecha. Kairin la'oila Teichecha. They read for the aliyah of the Teichecha. Shloisha pesukim kaidim. They back up 3 pesukim before the Teichecha and repeat them from the aliyah before. Why? Kedei lahaschil b'davar toiv, because they want to start that aliyah with a bracha, not with a klala. Av shekvar kara shlishi oisan pesukim, even though the shlishi, the prior aliyah, already laned those pesukim. Now, people in the audience, if you're not a Bal Kaireh, then what I just read makes perfect sense. But if you're a Bal Kaireh, you're shaking your head and you're saying, what, Rabbi Weiss? This doesn't make any sense. That's not the way the kriyah works in Parashas Parah. Parashas Parah, the Teichecha in Parashas Parah starts in Shlishi. It doesn't start in Revi. It starts in Shlishi. And Shlishi starts with Pasuk Yud, which is in the middle of the brachas, V'achaltam Yashan Noishan. And the Teichecha starts 4 pesukim later in Pasuk Yud Daled, V'im Lo Yisishma'u Li. So what's the Mishnah Berurah talking about? The answer is, the Mishnah Berurah is saying, we know that the minig in many places is that the Rav gets Shlishi. So what do you do in Bechukaisai? In Bechukaisai, you want to give the aliyah of the Teichecha to the Bal Kaireh. And the aliyah of the Teichecha is Shlishi. So that means the Rav is not getting Shlishi. So in some Kehillis, the minig was that the Rav would get Shlishi. But they would make a very short Shlishi. Shlishi would start with Pasuk Yud, V'achaltem Yashan Noishan, and it would end with Pasuk Yud Gimel. So Shlishi would be Yud, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. Shlishi would be 4 pesukim. That's fine. The minimum number is 3 for an aliyah. And then Revi would go to the Bal Kaireh, and it would start V'im Lo Yisishma'u Li V'lo Yisasu Is Kalam Shailah, which is the first aliyah of the Teichecha. So says the Mishnah Berurah, there was some Kehillis where what they did was they gave Shlishi to the Rav. They made the short Shlishi beginning with Pasuk Yud and ending with Pasuk Yud Gimel, like I just described. Then they would call up the Bal Kaireh for Revi, but they wouldn't start Revi by Pasuk Yud Daled. They would back up again to Pasuk Yud, and they would repeat the aliyah. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here. He's saying, even though it's not lechatchila to repeat, it's mamish not lechatchila to repeat, even if you're going to add new pesukim. Now, certainly in this case, you're going to add new pesukim. The Revi, the Bal Kaireh who's getting Revi, is going to reread Shlishi, but then he's going to lay in the whole Teichecha. So he's certainly adding, but it's not lechatchila. But even though it's not lechatchila, in Parashas Parah, where we have the Teichecha, there are Kehillis that are noyig to do it lechatchila. Okay, Mishnah Berurah Eiskan Chaf. Shloisha pesukim. The Mechaber said, if the second aliyah adds on 3 pesukim, b'makim she'efsher, when he can, so b'diavad, that's okay. Chaf Aleph, oyafilu shnayim. Or if the second aliyah repeats from the aliyah before him, and he only adds on 2 new pesukim. Why is he only adding on 2 new pesukim? Mishum d'lo efsher, because there's no choice. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Hainu, shehoisif shnei pesukim al pachasuk echot shekara mima shalofanav. What he did was the second aliyah. The second aliyah was only 3 pesukim. One pasuk was a repeat from the aliyah before, and then he added on 2 new pesukim. Which, like I showed you earlier in the share, that's exactly what we do on Rosh Chodesh. On Rosh Chodesh, the Kohen lanes 3 pesukim, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Then the Levi repeats pasuk Gimel, and he lanes Gimel, Dalet, and Hey. So he adds on 2 new pesukim, and he repeats 1. The Levi repeats 1 pasuk that the Kohen laned, and he only adds 2 pesukim, because on Rosh Chodesh there's no other way to break up the kriyah. Like we explained in Hilchos Rosh Chodesh. You see, on Rosh Chodesh we have a problem. There's no other way to break up the kriyah on Rosh Chodesh. Why do we have this repeated pasuk? Bishum deloy efsher. Because there's no other way to break up the kriyah. Why is there no other way to break up the kriyah? Well, an aliyah has to have a minimum of 3 pesukim. So let's see what we're going to do. Let's say the Kohen lanes Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Okay. Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Lemar, Tzavis b'nei Yisrael v'amarta aleim es karbanim lachmi l'ishai rech nichaychi tishbur lakriv liba mayadai. That's pasuk Beis. Pasuk Gimel. V'amarta lehem zeha ishai shatikriv l'Hashem klasim b'nei shana tibimim shtar malayim on the. That's Kohen. Now, what do you want? You want the Levi to start from pasuk Dalet? How many pesukim does the Levi have to lane? Well, he has to lane a minimum of 3 pesukim. Okay, let's say the Levi lanes pasuk Dalid, pasuk Hey, and pasuk Vav. Okay, so he's going to start with pasuk Dalid as Hakeves Echad. He's going to lane pasuk Dalid, pasuk Hey, pasuk Vav, and he's going to end off the aliyah L'rech nichayach isha Hashem. Now we're up to pasuk Zayin. Now you're going to call up the Shlishi. Okay, how many pesukim does the Shlishi have to lane? He has to lane at least 3 pesukim. Now we have a problem. First of all, there's only 2 pesukim left to this parsha. What do I mean to this parsha? I mean to the next pay in the Chumash, to the next break in the writing of the Sefer Torah. There's only 2 pesukim left. There's only Zayin and Ches. Now there's a halacha that you're not allowed to end off. An aliyah cannot end off where there are less than 3 pesukim less to the end of the parsha. Oh, so that means that the Levi can't end off at the end of pasuk Hey. Oh, so what's the Levi going to do? Well, the Levi could lane until the end of the parsha, so he could continue and he could lane Vav, Zayin, and Ches. Okay, so now we're going to call up the Shlishi. The Shlishi is going to start by pasuk Tes. How many pesukim does the Shlishi have to lane? He has to lane a minimum of 3 pesukim. Okay, so he'll lane pasuk Tes and pasuk Yud. That's a whole parsha. That's Uvayom HaShabbos through Veniska. He's going to lane 2 pesukim. He can't lane now only pasuk Yud Aleph, because there's a halacha that you can't lane less than 3 pesukim into a new parsha. And Uvarashech Chachechem pasuk Yud Aleph is the beginning of a new parsha. So he's going to have to lane Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel so that he gets the minimum of 3 pesukim into the new parsha. Oh, what's that going to leave for the rest of the kriyah? It's only going to leave Yud Dalid and Tesvav. And you can't go on to Tezayin, because Tezayin is already not in Yonah D'Yoma. Tezayin is already talking about Pesach. So there's no other way to break up the kriyah on Rosh Chodesh, and therefore what we have to do is the Kohen lanes 3 pesukim, the Levi repeats 1 of the pesukim that the Kohen laned, and he adds on 2 pesukim. Okay. Ois Katan Chaf Beis. So again, could you repeat pesukim? So if you repeat pesukim for the previous aliyah, but you add on 3 new pesukim, for sure you're okay. If you repeat pesukim and you only add on 2, why'd you only add on 2? Because you had no choice. It wasn't practicable to add on a third. It wasn't practicable to add a third. You were only able to add 2 bishum desalak inyana, because by the time you laid 2, you're already out of chayvas hayoim. The topic is already over. The iloy efshar klal have you dumi the pariyachag. Ois Kalachav Gimel, V'im Lav, if you didn't add on at least 2 new pesukim, then the aliyah doesn't count. V'im Lav, Shaloi Kara Shloisha B'makim De'ef Shaloi Likroi Shloisha, if you didn't lane 3 new pesukim, when halachically you could have, or you didn't add on at least 2 pesukim when you were able to add on 2 pesukim, then this aliyah doesn't count towards the minimum number of aliyahs. Miloshin zeh mashma, from the language of the Mechaber, it is implied it sounds like you didn't do anything that's osir. The only thing is, you need a minimum number of aliyahs. On Shabbos you need 7, on Yom Tov you need 5, on Monday you need 3, on Rosh Chodesh you need 4. So you didn't have the necessary number of aliyahs. But did you do something osir that you weren't allowed to do? No. Elashein oilim in a kriyim. In this, the Mechaber is going according to his previously stated opinion, not previously, but later on. Siman reish pei beis if beis v'ayin chamber hamad chelik al zeh. Ois cotton chav hey. And now the Mechaber said that the great exception to this rule is the laning of chalamoid sukkos. Now, what's unique about the laning of chalamoid sukkos? Well, the laning of chalamoid sukkos, the entire laning is only about the karbanos that were brought on chalamoid sukkos. And each day only has 1 carbon. So for you, b'nei chutz la'aretz, I'll tell you a very interesting thing. I happen to have a sukkos machzor here from before when we needed it. So let's go to the laning of chalamoid. Okay, the laning of chalamoid, sukkos. Okay, let's say this is a shana rabbah. I don't want a shana rabbah. No. Okay, let's go to the first day of chalamoid. Okay, in chutz la'aretz, what day of Yom Tov is the first day of chalamoid? Well, let's count. The first day of Yom Tov in chutz la'aretz is either the first day of Yom Tov, or it's chayil, or it's a weekday. So the first day is either day 1 or it's chayil. The second day is either day 1 or it's day 2. If it's day 2, it's chayil, right? So the first day is either chayil or day 1. The second day is either day 1 or day 2. Okay. The third day, which by us chutz la'aretz is the first day of chalamoid, what we have in chutz la'aretz as the first day of chalamoid is either day 3, right? If day 1 in chutz la'aretz was really day 1, then the first day of chalamoid is day 3. It's the third day of Yom Tov. If, however, day 2 was really day 1, then the first day of chalamoid is only day 2. So the first day of chalamoid in chutz la'aretz, sveika d'yoma, it's either day 2 or it's day 3. Okay. Against that backdrop, what do we lane on the first day of chalamoid? Well, we're going to lane about the karbanos of that day. So what do we lane? Well, the kohen lanes uvayom hasheni parim b'nei bakar shteim asar elim shtayim. He lanes the carbon of day 2 of Yom Tov. Well, that makes sense, because the first day of chalamoid might be the second day of Yom Tov. If Yom Tov Sheni was really day 1, so then the first day of chalamoid is day 2. So we lane uvayom hasheni. That's very appropriate. That's what the kohen lanes. What is the Levi lane? The Levi lanes are by Yom HaShlishi. By Yom HaShlishi is also very appropriate, because it could be that Yom Tov Rishon was really Yom Tov Rishon. Yom Tov Sheni was really the second day of Yom Tov. The first day of Chalamoid is really the third day of Yom Tov. So we lane by Yom HaShlishi. So far we're great. Both the Kohen and the Levi lane very appropriate kriyos. The Shlishi is a little bit of a kasha. The Shlishi is a problem. The Shlishi lanes of a Yom HaRevi. Now Yom HaRevi is not appropriate at all. Today, the first day of Chalamoid Sukkos cannot be the fourth day of Yom Tov. By no math is the first day of Chol Hamoed, Sukkos, the fourth day of Yom Tov. So why do we lay in a V'yom Revi? The truth is, this is a machlokes that we learned, where we learned Hilchos Sukkos. This is a machlokes, the Mechaber and the Ramah. The Mechaber holds that we cannot lay in a V'yom Revi. It's completely inappropriate. The Ramah holds that we do lay in a V'yom Revi. But what does the Revi lay? There's 4 aliyahs on Chol Hamoed. What does the Revi lay? The Revi lanes uvayom hasheni and uvayom hashlishi. So guess what? The Revi repeats the laning of the Kohen and the Levi completely, and he does not add any new pesukim, which flies in the face of the halacha of Kuf Lamed Zayin Sivav. Kuf Lamed Zayin Sivav, we learned that you must add, l'chatchila you have to add 3 new pesukim. B'diavad, it's okay if you only added 2, if you had no choice. B'makom she'i efsher, like on Rosh Chodesh. On Rosh Chodesh, the Levi only adds 2 new pesukim over the Kohen, but we said, lo efsher, okay. But other than that, you gotta add at least 2 new pesukim, except for the Parei Achag, except for the laning on Chol Hamoed Sukkos. On Chol Hamoed Sukkos, the Revi does not add any new pesukim. He lanes Ubayom Hasheni, which was laned by the Kohen. He lanes Ubayom Hashlishi, that was laned by the Levi. So he's not adding anything new. And yet it's acceptable. You know why it's acceptable? Because he has no choice. What else is he going to lane? Oh, Rabbi Weiss, what's the problem? Let him lane the same thing that the Shlishi laned. Well, first of all, that wouldn't help. Then he's repeating the Kohen, he's repeating the Levi, he's repeating the Shlishi. Okay, so on the first day Chol Hamoed, let him lane. Why is he laning day 2 and day 3? Let him lane day 4 and day 5. Why is he laning 2 and 3? Oh, you know why? Take a look at the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chav Hey, because the Mishnah Berurah Chav Hey says B'Chol Hamoed Sukkos Tahar Revi Chayzer v'Kairei Mashakara HaKohen v'Alevi. The Revi is going to repeat what was laid by the Kohen and the Levi, and he's not going to add anything new, mishum delayef shalikreis lefanav, because he can't just keep on going and laying Yom Chamishi, Yom Shishi, Masha Einam in Yom Shal Yom, because it's completely inappropriate. He's laying the karbanos of days that today certainly is not. Oh, but Rabbi Weiss, how about the Shlishi? The Shlishi laid something that's completely inappropriate. Okay, so researching this question, the answer seems to be that we're not so concerned about the Shlishi. Why not? Because the third aliyah is not an aliyah that's coming only because of Yom Tov. The third aliyah, every Monday, every Thursday, we have 3 aliyahs. Every Shabbos afternoon, we have 3 aliyahs. The fourth aliyah is an aliyah that is coming specifically for Yom Tov. So in the aliyah that comes specifically for Yom Tov, we're going to have the Balkari lane something that is completely inappropriate to that day? That doesn't make any sense. And therefore, the way the kriyah is broken up here in Chutz La'aretz on Chol Hamoed Sukkos is the Kohen and the Levi lane the 2 days that are incorporated by Sveika D'Yoma. So the first day of Chol Hamoed, the Kohen lanes day 2. It might really be day 2. The Levi lanes day 3. It might really be day 3. The Shlishi, he lanes day 4. Inappropriate, but not such a concern. The Revi, the Revi repeats the Kohen and the Levi because there's nothing else for him to lane. He has to lane something that's appropriate for the day. Okay, I hope that this was all very clear. Very complex stuff. I'm doing the best job that I can. I hope it's clear enough. We're going to break here for now. We'll continue next time in Siman Kuf Lamed Ches. I may try to record a share tomorrow. Well, I will try. I don't know if I'll be successful. So that we stay on the page. We'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be made against Kriah Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasot shidduchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the B'yisrael Tzedek Meher v'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.